Taking a math class in your 50s and 60s? Who ever heard of that? I'm Adam Hamalian,
And I'm Sherry Hutchens.
and this is the Real Story with Adam and Sherry, where we talk about all things real estate, mainly for our clients, some for our colleagues, and mainly because we like talking with each other. Well, today we're going to talk about making ourselves better agents. And one of the things that is important to do in every walk of life is if you're not growing, you're shrinking. And that's true professionally. And so we like to ask ourselves every year, what is it that we're going to do this year that's going to make us better agents or just better people?
Yeah,
Um, Sherry, what do you have on your list of things that you're going to do this year to be a better agent or just enrich yourself?
I've got three things on my list. The first one is real estate related, and it is to get my designation for my accredited buyer representative from NAR. That is a designation that teaches you how to work with buyers. Have I worked with buyers for 23 years? Absolutely. But there's always something new to learn. And as you know, the business is changing constantly, but especially in the last couple of weeks as it relates to working with buyers. So I'm going to get that taken care of. I think you're going to do that as well.
Signed up for that class just today, so we can
Yep.
compare notes along the way. Yeah,
All right, good. And you're getting your broker's license as well, or broker license renewal.
right. I have my broker's license. Yeah, so that's gonna every time you take all those classes over again, sometimes you didn't learn something the first time and you learn it as you review it, or sometimes you didn't think you had an experience with it. And so, since having some experiences, taking the classes just reminds you, particularly around the vocabulary around some of it. But
Yep.
um, that's why they have you renew your license every 4 years.
Yep. I did mine last year, as you know.
Yeah.
So the
Well,
second thing,
the second
sorry.
thing I'm doing this year is I'm getting a new hip.
Oh, that's exciting.
I know, right? A
What's wrong with your old hip?
little bit of the I don't know. Well, I do know it. Arthritis. Yeah. So I'm gonna get a nice new ceramic capped ball joint, and I've been told if I'm lucky or unlucky, it might squeak when I walk. So we'll see what happens. Anyway,
So we'll know when you're coming,
that's
right?
right. I won't be sneaking up on anybody.
You
All
seem
right.
really young to be getting a new hip.
Well, yeah, let's not get into that. That's a whole nother
Yeah.
podcast. Uh,
Yeah.
Besides taking the buyer certification, what else are you doing this year?
So the second thing I want to do is learn how to grow things because I'm a terrible gardener. I love gardens. I'm in awe of people who can garden. There's an agent in our office, Pete Paradero. He has the most amazing gardens. He makes it seem so easy. You just plant things, you water it, and it grows. And well, that's not how it works in my garden. So I bought one of those put it together raised beds. And oddly enough, I'm not going to have any trouble putting it together. I know how to do that. It's growing the plants that I'm going to put in it that seems to be a challenge for me. So that is what I'm going to do hopefully soon when it warms up a bit and I can start planting things.
Well, I don't know if that's completely true that you can't grow things because you have like this whole forest of lemon trees in your backyard. It seemed like every time we sell a house where there's a lemon tree, a potted lemon tree, and
Oh,
the seller doesn't want it and the buyer doesn't want it, you seem to bring them home like feral cats.
they need to be rescued.
That's right. And so you have this whole little forest of lemon trees in your backyard, and they seem to be doing just fine.
They are doing just fine. I think that they take care of themselves. All I have to do is give them a little water every so often. So,
That
but
works.
my goal is to grow tomatoes, and they seem to be more problematic and more needy than a lemon tree. So,
All
I
right.
just have this idea that I'm going to have big, juicy red tomatoes that I can slice really thick and put a little balsamic vinegar on them in the summer and have that as my dinner. And so that's my goal. We'll see what
That
happens.
sounds amazing. No salsa or marinara sauce, just the fresh
Maybe,
tomatoes. Yeah.
maybe we
I guess
learned how to. Sorry.
why waste the fresh tomatoes on cooking them down? So yeah, maybe.
Well, exactly. So I can go buy salsa and marinara sauce, but I can't buy homegrown tomatoes. They just don't exist out there.
All right. That's two things. What was the third thing?
So the third thing, this might surprise you to hear me say that I have signed up for a geometry class because I want to freshen my geometry skills.
Really? Now tell me, why would you want to take a math class? I mean, there is some math that I really liked, but I am really happy not taking math. Why do you want to take a geometry class?
In 2019, I saw a picture of a quilt that had been juried into the big Houston quilt show and just fell in love with it and realized right off the bat that there was no pattern for this particular quilt. And that if I wanted to recreate it, if that was even possible, I was going to have some advanced math skills, specifically geometry. So I signed up for a geometry class. And then all of a sudden, a worldwide pandemic hit in the early part of, do you remember
I
that?
thought about that. Yeah, something like
Something
that.
like that. And and I thought this is perfect time. I'm gonna take my geometry class, I'm gonna perfect my croissant recipe, blah, blah, blah. And instead, we sold more houses that year than we ever sold in any other year. So geometry class kind of got pushed aside. And honestly, I forgot about it until I came across this picture the other night and thought, I need to make this quilt.
So I'm a little confused. I mean, I know that you do the quilts you do are not my grandma's quilts. They're really amazing and beautiful. But mentally, still, I think about quilts primarily being built out of blocks and those blocks being made of
Mhm.
small pieces and squares and triangles and rectangles,
Yes.
obviously geometric shapes. But I can't imagine you needing to take geometry for that. What does a quilt look like that you need geometry for that's not just squares with a quarter inch seam to sew on?
Yeah. Well, I think that your grandma's quilts were probably perfectly beautiful and wonderful and served a great function of keeping people warm when they needed to be warm. And it's the old quilts are the things that got me into the craft, back in the 1980s. But I tend to go towards traditional quilts with a very modern twist. And this quilt that I became fascinated by is a big rectangle shaped quilt. It was for display, not for a bed. And it looks like a big tunnel, almost like maybe I don't know, one of those Japanese style wood blocks, like a big wave. Uh,
Okay.
and it's like if you're standing in front of the quilt, you could almost look through it to see where the tunnel ends. And
Wow.
it's all done in little tiny pieces that all fit together and form this curve. And there is no pattern for it. The woman who, she's an artist actually, who designed that quilt and was lucky enough to be able to have it displayed for the biggest quilt show in the world every year. She's an engineer, so this was probably a piece of cake for her. It's not a piece of cake for me. I'm going to have to figure out how to do it. So hence the geometry class.
Well, that sounds fascinating. Maybe I can help you with the geometry. I know I can't help you with the quilting, but geometry was the one math class that I really did well in.
Oh,
Uh,
really? Oh,
yeah.
interesting.
In my high school, there were two math teachers that were brothers. They were both named Mr. Cooper. Obviously, they're brothers. And Al
That
Cooper
must have
was
been
my
confusing.
I know, right? And they both taught math, and I had one for algebra and one for geometry. And they probably, if they ever compared notes, thought I was a different student. And because the geometry teacher would write the whatever the assignment was on the board, and when I first came into the classroom, I'd see it, and I would start doing the homework, but even before he lectured, because it just made sense to me.
Oh,
Now,
interesting.
algebra I did okay in. Calculus was just like a wasteland. I mean, I was happy to survive that, and survive is really the right word.
Yeah.
Um, but if you need help with geometry, it just my brain clicks that way. So maybe I can help you with that. You never know.
Okay. All right. I'll take you up on that.
Yeah.
Math was not easy for me. It was not my favorite subject. And in fact, even as early as fifth grade, I had opinions about math that I was happy to share. I can't remember my teacher's
Wait, wait,
name.
wait, wait, wait. Little fifth grade Sherry had opinions. Yeah, that
I,
checks out.
I know it's hard to believe. 10 years old.
That checks out. Yeah.
Uh-huh, exactly. And they're
Okay.
teaching us mixed fractions. How
Okay.
much is 1/2 plus 1/4? And I'm thinking, who cares? So I raised my hand and I said, why are you teaching this to us? We are never going to need this. This is ridiculous. 10 years old.
Yeah.
And Mr. Christie was our math teacher. And he paused and he said, thank you, Miss Hutchins. and went right on teaching his mixed fractions. And thank goodness he did, because I use them all the time now. But
Oh,
at the time,
good.
I thought it was just ridiculous. So that kind of is a whole synopsis about my relationship with math. I need it, but I didn't want to learn it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I never quite understood about fabric is like that they sell it in yards and in like an eighth of a yard or a quarter
Yeah.
yard or like it's all fractions, right? Isn't that, I mean, like
Uh,
don't
yes, it
measure things
is.
in inches or millimeters or it
Well, if you go to Europe, they sell it in metric, in meters, which is a little
okay.
bit different than a yard. I think it's like I think it's bigger than a yard, like
A
42
little bit
inches or
bigger than a
something.
yard. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
yeah. So, but yeah, I never thought about actually quilting in Europe. It would be a whole different situation. I'll just learn geometry and make my little quilt and worry about metric
Yeah.
in my next
I
life.
I had a teacher in high school, not for math, but, for both physics and chemistry, and, I actually my uncle had him for slide rule, like, 35 years earlier, and he had
That's
been
funny.
teaching at Alameda High that long, and so, my brother and I both had him for physics and chemistry, and he used to use a slide rule, and in those days, so this is, like, around 1980, we had 4 function calculators with the big buttons, or like, plus, minus, divide, multiply, and if we were lucky, it also had square root. And he always so we'd figure out what the equation was supposed to be on the board, and then he'd
Mhm.
challenge us, "All right, let's see if you can use your calculator faster than I can use my slide rule." And, of course, he'd whip out his slide rule, and we would all be trying to do the numbers, and he would beat us every single time.
Oh,
Uh,
that's funny.
yeah, I mean,
Get a little bit of experience, right?
yeah, he was pretty good at that. But I don't know. The other thing I remember is teachers saying, you got to learn this math because you won't have a calculator in your pocket everywhere you go. And it's like now we've got these cell phones that have amazing calculators built in, or at least get you to the internet where you can calculate something there. I mean,
Yeah.
are so absolutely spoiled. I was going to say blessed. It's sometimes a curse with the not having to use a slide rule. Did you use slide rules when you were in high school?
I don't remember using slide rules, and
Abacus,
maybe yes,
right?
yes,
Okay.
because I mean, I mean, there's 12-year age difference here between us, and I did not have a four function calculator in high school. I had a piece of paper and I had a pencil, and we figured everything out that way.
Well, it served you well being able to do the long division with actually a long piece of paper, so,
I'm not sure I can do it anymore because I
yeah,
do have a cell phone that does all those things for me.
that
So
well, I'm so, I mean, I say proud as if that anybody should expect different, but you absolutely for a non-digital native, the digital world doesn't slow you down at all. You have mastered it as easy as a digital native, so,
yeah, it comes easy to me, which is I'm really lucky. So I'm not afraid of it.
well,
That's and
you're not
technology
afraid of
is
asking the question why, and learn stuff, so, that little curiosity has served you well. Um,
yeah, yep.
sometimes your curiosity is annoying, but sometimes it serves you
Really?
well.
Why?
Hey, thank you, everybody. Um well, one of the things, so this, it's not directly related to real estate. In theory, this podcast is supposed to be about real estate, but one of the reasons why we talk about these personal goals as well as the professional ones is it just helps us be well-rounded people, and I think that makes us for better agents, and it helps
Yeah,
us relate to our clients better. I mean, half of our clients are your quilting buddies, so of course you have to quilt, but it's more than that for you, right? I mean, it's part of how you I don't know, maybe decompress at the end of the day. Talk about why
absolutely.
quilt is such a integral part of your everyday routines.
Well, even though I have a job that is not technically very creative, I'm a creative person. And so I like making things, and I've painted over the years. In fact, there's one of my paintings on the bookcase behind us. It kind of looks like a quilt, actually,
A little bit.
oddly. But I've always done something, and quilting is a way for me to come home from work if I've had a stressful day or a busy day or I'm tired. If I work on something that, and I only work on hard quilts, I rarely do easy quilts. It takes me away from everything. I can, get into this kind of Zen mindset and just focus on what I'm doing and not think about the transaction that we're working on, or the stress that over who knows what's going on in our world. There are so many different variables when you're in the middle of a transaction or working with clients. And able to, as you said, decompress and just relax and not think about work for a while, which is really important for us.
And you make amazing quilts. We
Thank
should
you.
see if we can interject some of them here in the video version of the podcast so you can
Thank
see
you.
it. And if you don't have access to it, you should check out our Facebook pages because she's got some amazing images of things that she's worked on and even quilts that have been submitted to shows. So,
Yeah.
again, this is not my grandmother's quilt. Not that my grandmother was in competition here, but it really is kind of amazing the work that it gets created.
Didn't you tell me your grandmother cut out her quilt fabric on a pool table or something like that?
Well, it's not just necessarily quilting, but she came to San Francisco for essentially finishing school. She studied to be a seamstress. Um,
Oh, I
and
didn't know that.
yes, that was she
Oh,
came from the farm in the Central Valley to San Francisco, um, and so yeah, that's what she did. And so in this room that my grandfather built above the garage, there was a pool table, actually my uncle's pool table, and they put a ping pong top table on top of it, and she used it as her cutting table. And it was always a little dicey to go play ping pong in your socks, because you were more than likely to step on a loose pin someplace
uh,
embedded on the floor. Uh,
ouch.
but it was also just kinda like you'd look around at these projects that she was making, and actually, there's a funny story that she used to make my dad shirts when he was a boy,
Uh-huh.
his clothes, and, he
Yeah.
went away to college, to Cal Poly. This is a long time ago, and he rode the train down to San Luis Obispo, and, his mom, my grandmother, sent him a shirt for his birthday, and, little did anybody know that my dad was still growing. He was, I think the story is he was 5'6" when he graduated from high school, might have been 5'8", but he eventually ended up being 6'4", and
Oh
so
my gosh.
he had a major growth spurt between the last time she made him a shirt and the time she made this one to send to him. And so the sleeves were like an inch too short. And he made a phone call at Christmas time because they didn't go home at Christmas back then. It was
Oh,
like you were there.
yeah.
And, so he called us had to talk to his dad. "I think mom's losing it. She made this shirt and it doesn't fit me." And it was like nobody could have imagined that she would have made it wrong. So, not exactly a quilt, but I think she ended up piecing cuffs
But
on
yeah,
the end of those sleeves to make that fit. So,
oh, that is, it takes a whole talent to do that kind of thing,
yeah,
actually.
actually, yeah, amazing.
From quilting. What a sweet story. I'm sure if he went from 5'6" to 6'4", it was more than an inch short on his sleeves.
Well, that was only the first fall. He kept
Yeah,
growing. It wasn't
exactly.
Yeah, it wasn't all in a couple months.
Wow,
Well,
6'4".
yeah. Well, I think that probably wraps it up for today. If you've
Okay.
liked this conversation between us, feel free to be sure to like and subscribe. We put these out about every week or so. Some weeks are like this, where it's more kind of our hobbies on the side, and a lot of times it's more about real estate. So check us out. Thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you.